She awoke with a gasp and a cold sweat, strong words hanging on her lips that she couldn't quite remember. She paused, confused, and then opened her eyes. It was morning, and the familiar, consistent rhythm of her alarm clock coaxed her into consciousness. It was Tuesday, and the sunlight bled brightly into her bedroom, just as it always had, every morning some vague echo of the last. It was just as she wanted it. Every day she was born again into an asylum of her own utopia, an entire world filled with her own creations, her own vegetation, her own urban planning, and her own people. She was capable of shaping them herself due to a fantastic obsession with pattern and rhythm. Ah, the people. The people, she had quickly learned, were uncontrollable. They were fickle and emotional, and so, like a grand comb of the universe, she would try to untangle them to achieve a more perfect order. Jenny rolled out of bed and began her daily routine. On the way, she passed that door, this one she was never to go into. Even in a physical place of her own construct, she had learned, there must be some things we can't bear to look at. Traveling to the kitchen, she stopped and saw an object quickly scurry from under the door. Could that have been a cockroach? She shuddered. She didn't remember ever including roaches in the equation of her world architecture. She didn't dwell on it too long. The world often continued to build itself based on developments in space and time. It was only natural. Jenny had designed her world so that the outermost parts were lined with pristine, tall buildings ascending to the sky. The streets were light and open, easily navigable. And it was underground where she built the subways, filled with the complex, unpredictable civilians of her world. And the subways, though constructed cleanly and with precision, had become a strange, filthy tangle of things unexplainable. The simple presence of people in transit had bore a weight on it. On the way to work, Jenny sat quietly and reviewed Kafka's Metamorphosis. The subway heaved along, carrying the weight of the people. Jenny dedicated her life to trying to fix these people on a case-by-case basis as she felt issues arising. It seemed like an endless array of problems, and it could be disheartening at times. She tried to be patient because, after all, they were reflections of herself. Jenny lifted her eyes when she saw a young couple step onto the train, arguing about whether or not to get pregnant again. She could sense that they had lost their first child, and this had deeply affected their relationship. The woman felt heartbroken, but the man felt optimistic about starting a new family, wanting to forget the tragedy they had suffered. Each of them was deeply impacted by their upbringing and various experiences. Jenny slowed down time and pulled up the graphics associated with this glitch in the system. She lifted her hands into the air and smoothed out the pattern. When everything seemed right, she closed the file and returned time to motion. Jenny dropped her eyes back down to her book and continued to read. The couple seemed in agreement that they would consider a child after all. Perhaps her work at the office was paying off, she thought. Work on this particular day was no different than any other. Jenny sat relaxed and poised to balance her next equation, to maintain the entire world all just with a most deep sense of pattern. Jenny positioned her scroll to the golden spiral. She liked to consider whether she was here or there, and how did she get from point A to point B? How did it impact the environment, and especially how did it impact other people? Deep in thought, Jenny hummed like a machine of her own design. The computer glow glazed against Jenny's face. Jenny was about to pack up when she noticed that the Newton's cradle to her right seemed a bit off. Typically, it swung throughout the day into the night, always balanced, one steel ball swinging in and then one steel ball swinging out. Jenny could see now that 2 steel balls swung in and just 1 swung out. Her heart skipped a beat. Something was off in the balance. Jenny grabbed the Newton's cradle and her glasses and ran out of the office to the elevator. She could sense the disorder, but it still felt vague and unquantifiable. She sprinted down 42nd Street toward the subway. She wondered what could be so off in the balance that it would throw off the device. Could it be thievery, she wondered? A bar fight? A murder? She had dealt with only the constant minor deviations from her utopian idea of the world. She really had no idea. As she approached the subway, outside she could see rioting. 2 sides, one vying for the future and one for the past, she sensed. A worthy battle, Jenny noted briefly, as she placed her specs on her nose hurriedly and adjusted them, pulling up the information graphic associated with the turmoil. She frantically sorted through the information but couldn't read the data. It was jumbled and disorganized. She searched, desperately trying to smooth out certain areas. More and more people joined the jumble of hands and arms and weapons. Jenny heard a gunshot and looked up suddenly. She couldn't slow down time. In fact, it was speeding up. Jenny thought of the door. I don't really know what's behind that door, Jenny reasoned. It was the very last resort to open it and to see what she couldn't yet face. Jenny's mind raced with all the logical paths and ideas as the radius of dysfunction multiplied, and she was failing to come up with a solution. It started to rain. Frustrated and desperate, Jenny turned and ran down the alley toward the door. Thunder cracked closely over her head. She flung open the front door of her apartment. It was almost dark. She could see the roaches more clearly now emerging from the forbidden door. She was breathing hard, and a puddle formed on the floor under her feet. It's how it is written, and she knew this. She wasn't seeing straight. She fell to her knees and crawled toward the door. The handle was hot. She pushed hard. In an instant, it came back to her. The death of her aunt. The last time she saw Chris, the way her father was so quiet when he placed the stone on his own father's grave. There was silence, and then she heard the rhythm of a heart monitor. Drenched in cold sweat, she felt cold air hit her face. She opened her eyes.
Jenny, can you hear me?
Said the doctor, peering over her, concerned.